Hello and welcome to Backstage Pass. My guests today are George Jacobstein and Josh Jacobstein, the owners of Rose Brand. Gentlemen, welcome to Backstage Pass.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
You too.
I think to get us started today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of Rose Brand, where it started and a little bit of how it came to be where it is now.
Well, the company was started by my great uncle, Charles Shapiro, in 1921. And he was was rag business, like schmattes, cleaning rags, not clothing. Some people call schmattes clothing. But he started off, I believe they were downtown New York. This is obviously well past before my time. But they were on White Street and a few other locations in very much lower Manhattan. And they were in the rag business and sold rags bought remnants of material from whoever and sold cleaning rags. When I came along, which was 1975, the business already matured a little bit in terms of the wiping cloths, but he was very innovative. He sold certainly a packet of rags that were for car dealers. He sold them all over the country. They could clean the windows. And he had some cleaning cloth mitts and things like that. It was really not theatrical whatsoever. He sold to industrial places, mostly in Manhattan, but also the steamship business. I remember seeing stationery 40 years ago that said, Rose Brand, we supply steamships. I guess rags for cleaning. I don't know. And so anyway, when I came along, they developed that business. And I think over the years, they started selling some theatrical fabrics because it was industrial material. Canvas, cheesecloth, which we called scrim back then, not even knowing what sharks do scrim, foggiest idea what it was. And materials like that, and they put out a little one-page flyer, imitators beware. And started selling a little bit of the theatrical business. But the business really was a rag business. And it was past when I came along, but that's how it started. The business was named after his wife, Rose, who was, I guess, my great aunt. And that's how we got started.
Yeah, and I think the industry is a little bit different today in that it's been, the industry's grown up and it's formalized in the last number of years. And back then, I think people just went where they could find things for the theatrical industry. And so in New York, they were building shows in New York. So there wasn't a Rose Brand company at the time to go to. There weren't people like that. So they just, people are, they've always come up with ways to get the job done, get the show done. Sure. And so that's how they would find Rose Brand, Yeah.
And the original name of the company was Rose Brand Wipers,
and
right?
It still is, Wipers Inc.
Right.
We do business as Rose Brand. We're really Rose Brand one word, and for a lot of our online business.
Right.
And but we're just plain old Rose Brand.
Okay. Well, that does answer a question that I had. Is it Rose Brand or is it Rose Brand?
It's Rose Brand. But really Rose Brand.
Okay.
And if you get your paycheck, you get it from Rose Brand Wipers.
Bill, there happens to be a company in Brooklyn. I think they're very active and very good company that sells syrups to hotels and once in a while, we haven't in a while, but once in a while I remember getting once a check for like 80 or 90,000, and it made out the Rose Brand. It was fantastic. Turns out it wasn't ours though.
Tempting, I bet.
Very tempting.
So I remember when I first met Rose Brand, which was in the early 80s, about 82, I think. You were in the West 35th Street offices.
Oh, I guess we had moved from 138 Grand Street.
Yeah, the Grand Street was before my time, but boy, do I remember the 35th Street offices.
Remember the stairs walking up?
Uh-huh. I mean, what was it like in working out of a facility like that?
Well, it was an old building. It's no longer there because it's right next to the convention center in New York, and they're redeveloping the area, right, Josh?
Yeah.
And but it was a good space for us at the time, but we've obviously outgrown it many times over. And it was good because one of our customers was Francis Messmore from Messmore and Damon, who's both passed away. He and his wife Dorothy have passed away, but he was a colonel in the Army, retired, and he called me in the morning and said, "This prostitute." He was on 30. We were on 35th. He was on 28th, West 28th. There's prostitutes all over the place. I want you to call the cops and chase them out of here. So you call the cops, and then 4 hours later they'd be back. But it was sort of the Wild West Side back then.
It was indeed.
And all sorts of stuff happening. That was before the convention center.
Right.
And but it served us well at the time.
I want to remind you of a story that you and I shared of something that happened at the West 35th Street. I was doing shows for a particular fashion designer, and the show was all set up. It was Sunday night. I was back at home in Philadelphia, and the show was supposed to be the next morning. And this designer called me up and at 9 o'clock that night and said, "The show needs to change color. It needs to be black." It wasn't the set. All that was not black. He said, "It needs to be black, and we still have to have the show at 9:30 Monday morning." This is 9 o'clock at night. I had your home.
This is not an atypical story, by the way.
Right.
No beeping, no cell phones.
No beeping, no cell phones, but
Yeah.
I did have your home phone number.
Mistake.
It was a mistake. You met me, I believe, at about 4 a.m. And the freight elevator, which I assumed when I was going, as I'm driving over, that we'd throw it on the freight elevator, and
Wasn't working.
wasn't working because the operator didn't show.
Raymond didn't start till 8 o'clock.
Didn't start till 8 o'clock. So here we are, basically tossing bolts and bolts of black Duvaki.
Down the stairs or
Down the stairs. I think
Right.
it was down 7 flights of steps.
4.
4, huh?
Yeah, but I can remember people almost getting hit walking in. And rolls of velour would be bouncing down the steps.
Yeah. But we got the show up, and we were, 15 minutes late, which for me, it was the same day, so I was thrilled. But the only reason that worked was because you answered the phone and you were willing to come back over to the shop at 4 o'clock.
Well, maybe Josh would do that today.
Okay.
But we also, and then we'll talk about this, but we have fantastic people. Got guys like Mike Cucciaro who come here at 3 in the morning to meet someone, work Saturday, Sunday. We've got, a million people. Tom Caloris, other people, they get calls all the time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's served our business well. It's something that George started with, and that's really sort of the that's the vibe around this place. That's what people do, and it's it served us well, because if you answer that phone, you build that relationship with someone, and they, I think a lot of people in the industry know this. Then they come back to you time and time again.
Sure.
Because that's business, right? That's business.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to me a little bit about you, Josh, and how you ended up working for this
I
guy.
guess I'm the chief nepotist here, but no, I went to there really was never any pressure to come work here, and it was never a grand plan that I wanted to come work at Rosebrand. But I as a kid I would go into West 35th Street, and work a little bit, in the warehouse and in the sewing room from time to time. But it was never really my plan, and I went off to Washington University in St. Louis, and I got a degree in history, which guarantees lots of jobs right out of school. But I ended up working on documentaries for a little bit. I worked at ABC News for a couple of years at the assignment desk there, and in 2001, I was 25 then. I said, you know what, I should give this a try. If it's a really interesting business, it's I've always enjoyed what Rosebrand has done. If I'm going to do it, now's the time. And I quit my job. I rode my bicycle, not motorcycle, across the United States, and I came back, and I've been here ever since. So that's.
He started just before 9/11, literally 2 weeks before pre-9/11,
Right.
and which was obviously a sad time because we were down Chelsea Market at the time,
Chelsea
literally
Market, right.
a block or two from where the areas were shut off. Yeah. But we actually were in. I remember we were in London. I can't remember why, but we were in London, and we were walking through Hyde Park.
Right.
And Josh and I had gone somewhere, and we're walking back a very long walk to the hotel, and he brought it up. I said, to be very honest with you, I accepted it totally. I was apprehensive, thinking, God, there's great people here, like Peter Finder and et cetera, et cetera. And what are they going to think? Bringing in, they've been here for several years now, and I'm bringing in this young 20-some-odd-year-old kid. And when I told everybody he was starting, I was shocked at the overwhelming support, because they looked at it as continuity of a business.
Right.
Because I could have, I don't know, I've never tried, but believe me, we've had plenty of offers over the years. We don't talk to the people, but we've had plenty of people write we want to acquire your company. And they said, hey, great. Rosebrand's not going to be acquired by someone who's going to put us out of business or do whatever they do with a new company. And so they embraced it, and it's been that way ever since. So worked out well.
Besides, it was an opportunity to get you out the door. Right? Had
It hasn't worked so well yet.
Yeah, he's still here.
Yeah. He's not going
I'm here,
anywhere.
but
As my mother calls up every once in a while, she says he's never allowed to retire. And then she'll call me up and she'll say, seriously, he's never allowed to retire. They have their own separate domains. So this is
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
George, where did you start from?
You want to know where I grew up and
Where
all
did
that?
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rochester, New York in the 50s, very middle class, suburban, 1950s, you know. There were no soccer moms. My mother didn't even have a car, I don't think, until later on. But went to school there, elementary school, junior high school. And when I was, I believe, a junior, I ended up being involved with the newspaper. I was editor of the newspaper and student council and all that kind of stuff, not theater. Although my junior or senior year, I don't remember which, we were doing The Man Who Came to Dinner, I think that's the name of it. And the kid who was Mr. Stanley, who was the star of the show, had the longest lines, had a little problem with getting kicked out of school for, he was one of the first ones to smoke a little something during school, and they caught him, and he got out. Right. 1 week before the play, no Mr. Stanley. So I got chosen, and it was very hard memorizing the lines. So that was my first theatrical experience. Before that, I had just worked helping backstage a little bit. I don't even know what I was doing. It's a long time ago. But anyway, that was my first, probably and only big theatrical experience. I really have no background. So off to American University I went, Washington, D.C., majored in history and elementary education because it was during Vietnam. What can I tell you?
Right.
Most people I knew were like Donald Trump, heel spurs and other such things to get out of the draft. But anyway, in fall of 1969, when I was a senior, there was a first lottery for the draft. This is when they had the draft. Got 324, and the draft board said, forget it, we're never going to get to you. And but at the same time, I was studying a little bit to become a teacher because I liked working with kids. Became an elementary school in Potomac, Maryland, which is right outside of D.C. And I loved it. I did it for 4 years. At the same time, got my master's in school administration, thinking I might become a principal or something like that down the road. When I started, I was 22. The kids were 12. I mean, I wasn't that much older than the kids. And so I did that for 4 years, got my master's, and then decided my starting salary was $72.50. Even back in 1971, $72.50 didn't go very far. I remember borrowing money from my parents to get my master's from the University of Maryland. And so I decided to try something different. So I went for a short time to work for a company out of Philadelphia whose name I will not mention because they were not nice people and they ended up going bankrupt, and they tried to teach me all sorts of devious ways to rip off customers, which I fortunately did not pick up on. And back in February of 1975, I came to work for my uncle, the one I mentioned before, at Rosebrand. They were looking for someone. I really didn't know them. They were not close relatives. I'm in Rochester. They're in New York. Got to remember, back then, that was not easy. There were flights and all, but we just didn't do it. And so I'd only met them once or twice on state occasions. So I came to work for them and was thrust right into the rag business, which I hated. We used to get piles of laundry, clean laundry from hospitals and all, and then you go through them and people would cut them up into little pieces and sell them as rags. It was just pretty awful. Sometimes you'd find false teeth in there, stuff from the operating room, scalpels. And so I decided this is not for me. Couldn't do it. And so I really was interested more in trying to develop the theater business, because I told you back then they had literally a one-sheet flyer, which Josh, I think, has a copy of, where we had maybe 7 or 8 items. Scrim, canvas, muslin, flame-proof muslin we used to get from a company called Astrup. And so I ran with that. It just developed slowly over the years. One of my first customers was McManus Enterprises. Zoe Payne was there. Zoe has now been around the country, a lot of different jobs. She's been with us for a number of years. She's developed our rental department. She couldn't be better. Top-notch person. And she was one, she'd call up and say, I need 20 yards of muslin to go to so-and-so. And off it would go. And that's really how we got started. And so I tried to divorce myself a little bit from the rag business and concentrated on that and just developed slowly over the years. I had a product here, I had fabric here. I remember there was a guy called Yankel House of Pile Fabrics in the corner of Broadway and Canal. And we were a couple blocks away at 138 Grand. And he had remnants of pile fabrics, like, you know, animal skins, fake, not real. And I'd go in there, someone needed velour. I'd literally dig through a pile because this shit was piled high, you know, it was like this high with remnants. I'd go through and find something to look good, put it on my shoulder, carry it back to the office, and try to sell it. You know, one of the first big jobs we did when we eventually got into sewing, which is another story, but it had no selvage. The selvage had been cut off. Did I know that was not a bad thing? I didn't have the foggiest idea until the customer called and said, there's no selvage. So you learn.
Yeah.
So that's really how I really got started. But we had some interesting times back then.
You mentioned Bill McManus and the part of that. How much work did you do with Bill? I mean, he's...
Well, first of all, it was Bill and Steve Lister.
Right.
Steve Lister did the retail, the wholesale business, and Bill was a world expert on I think lighting and sound.
Right.
I remember going to his wedding, and literally it was a hotter than hell day, and Bill was a big guy, sweating like a pig, and he's setting up the sound and lights. Literally, they're saying, "Bill, you got to walk down the aisle." Not done yet, because he was filming it.
Right.
So he was a great guy, and so was Lister. And unfortunately, they're not around anymore. But I mentioned one story where one of the first jobs we did in sewing, which is probably around 80, one of the popes came to Philadelphia to the big convention center. I don't remember which pope, but a pope. And Bill McManus called me one day and said, "You got to get down here." We knew nothing. We didn't know a swag curtain from Adam. So we go down there, and it was the middle of the night. We had to get there like at 3 in the morning. And he says, "We're going up on the genie lift." I don't like heights. I don't do heights. And Bill McManus probably weighed in around 400, and I wasn't so small. We're getting up on this genie lift. It's going up and down, up and down. So we go up to the top of the place because they needed a Austrian valance, which I didn't have the foggiest idea what to do. We figured it out and did it, and that was one of my first experiences. And Steve Lister, we did business with him for years. Great guys.
Okay, so then you come on the scene. You said it was 2001,
yeah.
right? And what did you do? What was it like coming in? I mean, you were working on the assignment desk, you said before.
Right,
that.
right. Yeah, look, I mean, I think the way people have always been successful at Rosebrand, I think successful at almost any business really is you don't, one, I didn't know what the heck I was doing in the first place, and I didn't assume that I knew things, and I think that was helpful. And so, I learned, like most people here learn at Rosebrand, which is primarily by just picking up the phone and figuring it out. So I sat next to Eileen Rich, who happens to be an old family friend. She worked at Rosebrand for years and years, and she's really sort of the classic New Yorker, for those who knew Eileen. And with someone like Eileen, you listen to what she said because most of it was very good. You just had to make sure not to repeat some of it back to your customers, because then you would have no more customers. But she really was very knowledgeable of the industry, and so I learned by listening to her. I learned by talking to people at Rosebrand, and that's really how I learned the business.
And you were selling at that point, or?
Yeah, selling, and really again that's for years that's how most people here have started, and it's been the way we do it. You pick up the phone and you figure it out, and eventually people sort of they move into different directions in terms of where their interests may be and where their expertise may be. But I did that. I spent a lot of time in the marketing department as well, really focusing on that, because A lot of what Rose Brand does is we push our materials out there, and then you hope that the inbound calls come with it. So we spend a lot of time on the catalog and the website and things along those lines, and that's really how I got started.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
I just want to add that one Josh said that you see next to Eileen, and you got a lot of influence from other people too. But we've had some. I can't emphasize enough the quality of the people we've had and the small turnover we have. We've had people leave, of course. They've moved. We've also set up satellite offices. We have 2 people in Atlanta. We have a couple of people in Arkansas. We have one in Chicago and wherever else. Not because we're looking for business down there, although we are, but because they had personal reasons. They had to move for whatever reason. Right. And it's worked out well because now, of course, being on the phone, people don't even know where they're located. Who cares? But I do remember one time we hired Tom Calora, so you know Tom. Yeah, sure. He's our Cracker Jack sales guy. Everyone loves Tom. And he came to work for us. It was 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. And he shared an office with me because we're on 35th Street, didn't have any room. And he started calling customers and telling me he had switched from his previous job. He was actually a prop stagehand at Radio City, and also I think he sold tape. Right. And he starts calling people at 7 in the morning. It was great. I said, Tom, do you think maybe they wanted their coffee first? But that's, and he's never done it ever since. Right. He's here at the crack of dawn calling people and following up. So it's interesting. Josh sort of followed the same model.
Right. So we have this father-son team.
Right.
Which is unusual in the entertainment industry. There's not a lot of that out there, running a business. Any thoughts on why that might be?
I have no idea. I would say, I'd say one thing that I think probably works with us is that, it's a pretty good sized company. We have about 300 people who work for us. We have a ton of great managers and people here. So we're not on top of each other. And I think sometimes in a mom and pop business, if a father and son are working with each other all day long, they're probably going to kill each other. And we see each other every day, but he does his thing, I do my thing. There's certainly many times, over the course of the days and week where we're in meetings together, but we're not, in the same office, on the same job sites, working on things. And I think that helps, that it gives some separation there.
And I do know that I don't know why it's not more common. I have no idea. But I do know I've had comments from several people who have said, boy, you're lucky because you got a succession plan available. Because they know Josh and they know he can do it. So people are jealous, but certainly think that's a great idea because otherwise it's hard to get. Sometimes it's difficult to sell and move on if you own a small business, especially in the theater business. Yeah. So it's not easy.
No,
as you may know.
I might know something about that. Right. At this point, this is where they flash my phone number across the bottom of the screen.
Right. For sale. Right.
But seriously, it sounds like you guys have managed to find a formula that works that keeps you out of trouble. I mean, it keeps you from, as you say, killing each other because you're not on each other. You're not on top of each other all the time.
And I think, too, the fact that I give, right from the beginning, I've given Josh a lot of responsibility because, to be honest with you, a lot of the areas now, especially marketing, he knows much, much more than I know now or will ever know. Right. I mean, I used to lay out the catalog at my dining room table at 3 in the morning. Cut and paste, literally. Sure. Cut and paste.
Yep.
And, I did that for years. He was a little kid at home, and I used to get up and, go to sleep 1 o'clock in the morning, wake up, work for 3 hours, go back to sleep, and come to work at 7 a.m. But I can't do that anymore. He is totally involved with the catalog. We have a woman named Jillian Antipol who runs the catalog, and Josh is involved, Peter Finder's involved, Josh Elamany, a lot of other people. And I see it. I think I get a little input, but not much, and I don't want it because I know they can do it better. Sure. So it's worked out well. He's taken on that. Sales, which, I've stepped back from sales. I have a few people I talk to, but more just on a personal level. And so it's worked out great because we're a lot of areas in the business, I control the money.
Yeah.
He likes that. Monday morning when the checks
Monday
come.
morning
that's his
is a
favorite
big mail
favorite
day. I hate these wire transfers because
Yeah.
you don't have an envelope to
Yeah,
open.
you can't see them. You can't hold them in your hand.
Right.
Exactly.
But anyway, no, it's worked out well because we have a good division, and I don't never question what he does ever.
What about other members of the family? You have siblings?
I have a brother who's 37, and he lives down in Washington D.C. and he works in the government. He does
Okay.
Latin American affairs actually for the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
Wow.
So a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
Last year
Yeah.
he does the Caribbean, and last week at this time he was in Barbuda,
Barbados.
the one that got flattened.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now he said they took a Coast Guard boat over from Antigua. Boat broke down halfway over in incredibly choppy seas.
Right.
But they eventually got there.
Right.
He said the island is devastated. There's literally nothing left.
Right.
So that's what he does.
Yeah.
What I'd like to talk about or hear you guys explain is what that process looks like when somebody brings a really kind of oddball, avant-garde kind of a project to you and says, I want to do this, but they have no clue.
Right. Well, it's funny that's changed a little bit over the years too, because when I started in 2001, and even until not that far ago, our customers were really the experts, and our customers still are the experts. A lot of the people we deal with who are building shows, who are the scene shops, they come to us and say, I want X, Y, and Z. I want us to do this, and if we build it right and we do what they tell us to do, then then it's right. Then it works. I think what's happened a lot in the last number of years, and I think you can attribute a little bit to this whole idea of the theming of America. Like, you start with these Broadway shows where it's these people who really understand technical theater, but then they're building restaurants and theme parks and churches and God knows what, all these different things. And so we've been pulled into all these projects by people who they have budgets, they know how to they have this concept, but they don't really know how to exactly put all the nuts
Right.
and bolts together for it. And so we've adapted the company quite a bit to really get that business. And primarily, and it's George has been talking about a little bit, is it's about we bring in really good people. That's something that I'm most proud of. We spend a lot of time hiring. We spend a lot of time trying to find the best folks who've had that experience so that they can do it. So an example might be, just to give it a little bit more context, is someone might send us this rendering of something they wanted to do X, Y, and Z. Well, it doesn't really work that way necessarily, but we'll get people who have technical theater backgrounds to get into CAD, to draw pictures of it, to do mock-ups, to do all these things in order to see if it can actually work, and then we try and build it on a big scale.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
What happens when somebody comes in and wants to do the big thing, right? Whatever that
Right.
big thing happens to be, and they have the little budget.
I'm going to go away. No,
Yeah, I mean, you try, look, and that happens from time to time. I mean, the nice thing about, I think one of the cool things about what we do is that, like, we don't have these stories of, we always tell, like, young technicians when they come to work for Rose Brand, or, like, people out of school, like, you should go out into the real world and, like, go work in theater, go on the road, do all these things, because at the end of the day, Rose Brand, it's a fun place to work, but we're also selling 50 yards of Duvetine and, a curtain, and, but we're a small part of all these productions. So, if you go to a Broadway show, or you go to see a show in Vegas, or really, productions at schools and things like that, there's a pretty good chance there's something on it from Rose Brand. But it might be, one can of off-Broadway paint they sold us, 2 yards of muslin, the gaff tape that they bought for the show. So, it's, that's sort of our part in the show. And I think that's actually one of my favorite things about what we do, is that we just, we hit all these different markets in all these different ways. But we're not building the big Broadway show where you build it from soup to nuts. You're contributing a small part to a show.
You're part of a larger project.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also a little different with designers for Broadway shows and the scene and the shop owners. First of all, we deal with shops. We don't deal, very, very seldom do we deal with a producer on a show. We deal with Hudson, and we deal with
Show Motion,
Showman,
and Global.
and we used to deal with Messmore and Damon. We deal with Stiegelbauer, who does Saturday Night Live, and a lot of work for NBC.
PRG.
And PRG is a huge customer of ours. But they know what they're doing. They have huge staffs drawing and figuring this out. But we're fortunate we have enough people. We have a guy named Tom Sullivan who worked for the Met Opera as a scenic painter, I think,
Right.
for a number of years. He knows fabric inside out. Then he worked for Neil at Hudson for a number of years and was ready to make a change. And he came to us. And it's great because he can talk with these people, but mostly they know what they want.
Right.
But they do think sometimes that fabric can do the same thing as a piece of steel or wood. They don't understand sometimes that you can't make perfect right angle necessarily with fabric. Try, but it doesn't
You
always
give it a
work.
shot, yeah.
But those people, they know what they want. That's
Right.
what they do. And but we get involved with projects where they really do not know what they want, and they come to us, and we help them out the best we can.
Yeah, so we've really changed the company in that way so that we can take on projects like that. Because if our business was just servicing the Broadway scene shops, we'd be a much different company. Then the two of us probably would be in one office, and probably we'd be killing each other, But we've changed it to sort of really sort of take advantage of this whole theming of America, which for us has been, we've been pretty lucky to be pulled into those things. And those people do have budgets. I mean, you've seen some of these places, you can't believe it, and and you're doing these shows that Broadway doesn't have a budget for.
No, not at all.
And so those are the places where we have to rely on people who have had those jobs at the Met or in scene shops or whatever it is to help these ideas sort of come off the napkin and into
Exactly.
on fruition. But there's still a lot of napkin drawing that goes on here. Yeah.
I remember a napkin drawing that showed up. In fact, you sent me back a purchase order on it not too long ago, of a young rigger who sent you a drawing of an archway in Philadelphia at Bryn Mawr College.
Oh, I think I remember that.
right.
Yeah,
19 what?
that was 1982.
Yeah, we had no idea what to do.
And I think I found out later that it was the first, and I never knew how important this was, but it was the first fabric you would ever cut on a bias.
I, of course, was never
I was about to
involved
say,
with
he
that.
doesn't even know what the bias is.
I do know what the bias is, for God's sake. But really, those were interesting times.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, back then, if I can go back a bit,
Sure.
we started sewing, and I started in 75 and 78 or 9. We were the first company that I guess we were vertical.
Right.
Because we had fabric sitting here. Usually you get a call from a company there were a bunch of them that just sewed curtains for theater, for entertainment. Do you have 25 yards of batiste? And we send it over, and they make the curtain or whatever it might be. So here we are, we got all this fabric. So we started the sewing, and I think we probably teed off some people because all of a sudden we were doing things that they thought they were doing, and here we are. But it started with a company. They were 10 Leonard Street, and the reason I remember the address is Eileen Rich still lives there. It was a scene shop called Downtown Scenic, a guy named Richard Tenowitz. He decided, I don't know if you remember him, now he's in the movie business somehow, and he said he has 2 gals that do costumes by day, and at night he comes to their shop, and he does drops. They do drops for painting, but this was way before digital. And he said, I'm moving to Brooklyn. They won't go to Brooklyn in the middle of the night to sew drapes. So can they work in your place? And they did. 2 gals, Bunny Callahan and Susan Hook.
Yeah.
And they started, we'd leave them a pile, it was like Rumpelstiltskin. They'd call up at 5 o'clock, we get a job, I said, okay, we're gonna leave you 50 yards of muslin. Come back the next morning at 7 o'clock, they'd be long gone at their next job, and there was a drop all sewn up.
Right.
It started with 1 or 2 people, and then that eventually grew and grew and grew, but that really was our first entry into the sewing business and on a vertical basis.
Right. I remember Bunny and Sue.
Yep.
They were great.
Bunny
people.
was the gal that figured out the Bryn Mawr
The Bryn Mawr job.
job, which I think we ended up doing, and they may be ready for another one by now.
Yeah, they might be.
Hey, you gotta call them, Bill.
Yeah, I'll give them a shot.
Yeah, but it's funny, it's not like there's a school you go to say like, how do you learn how to sew really huge stage curtains? So, on that end, it's always been, it's hard finding people to do this. So a lot of our stitchers come out of the garment industry. From we have people from countries all over the world working for us. We've had people come out of costume shops, and they just sort of look at it as when they're in a good mood talking about it, sort of like, it's sort of a scaling thing, like, well, I used to make dresses that were this scale, now I'm making stage curtains that are that scale. Same thing, just a lot bigger.
A lot bigger,
so.
Right. I'd like to hear about some of the fun projects that you guys have done, whether they were challenging or just plain fun to do.
Sure.
Challenging, but then maybe fun at the end when we figured it out.
Yeah, right.
Because that's true, because they're always challenging when they come in the door.
Right.
But I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, and there's a bunch of jobs we just can't mention because we're under restrictions of the names of the customers. But the job I think we've done a great job on was the Radio City Music Hall curtain. We've done it twice. First time was under a guy named Bernie Block. I don't know if you knew Bernie. But anyway, this goes back years. We had no idea what we were doing, nor did he, but we pulled it off. And then maybe how many years, 3 years ago?
Yep.
They came to us, and they came specifically to Tom Caloris. And he worked, I would say, well over a year, maybe a year and a half, on fabric, which is historical. It has to be exactly the same as the original architect's specifiers for Radio City, which goes back I don't know how many decades. And he found a mill in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was cool. It was 100% made in America, which is
Unusual.
difficult to do with
Right.
fabric these days.
Right.
And they actually
imagine,
handled
yeah.
the fabric. Radio City bought the fabric, but we fabricated it, and it was a very difficult job, as you well know. I don't remember the size, but it's not the biggest. It's one of the top 2 or 3 biggest curtains and the largest curtains in the world. And I think if I'm not mistaken, we built it in 3 pieces. Took it over there, using their elevator system, of course. We're able to put it all together. And they're fantastic to work for. We're very close with Richie Claffey, and who was at the time, now he's with the Garden, but he was running Radio City at the time. They just they were incredibly supportive, and we did a great job. And to this day, that curtain, when it's active, is used. I mean, you've probably been to the Christmas show. It's up and down dozens and dozens of times every day. Right. Held up, we do repairs on it if we need to. Very proud of that job. So.
Yeah, and there's some nice, sometimes you do learn a lesson from something. One of the women who works in our sewing department, Melinda, who's back on West 35th Street years ago, I think she said it was maybe the first or second month she was working at Rosebrand when we did the first one, and she's looking at this curtain, and she came out of costume and she didn't know what it did. But you remember the old West 35th Street building, and she said, "I don't think we're going to be able to get this out of the building," and that was why we actually ended up the first time building it in 3 parts. And we were lucky she said that, not only because we wouldn't have been able to get out the building, but we wouldn't have been able to get it into the stage door at Radio City. So
yeah,
so
the stage door at Radio City ain't so big.
No, not at all.
And we couldn't have fit in our elevator.
Right.
So that's why we did the thirds.
Yeah.
Dodged a bullet.
Yeah. And I would
3
say,
trucks.
Yeah. The other thing that's been a lot of fun in the last number of years is Peter Finder's he's been working a lot on some of the Schubert theater jobs and doing some historical renovations to theaters. And that's cool. And I think one of the reasons I'm most proud of those is, one, they're beautiful curtains, and we subcontract Hudson Scenic in, and they paint them, and we do some installation work on them. But it's really sort of shown where we started from. As George was saying, we started out not really knowing what the hell we were doing and just sort of making it up as we went along, to the point where we could do these sort of jobs. Because for years, Rosebrand was sort of the place you went where you need something in 3 hours, you need something tomorrow, like, we're going to figure out how to get it done. And that's still what we do. And that's something that's really helped us grow. But at the same time, you want to be able to do these jobs that are really intricate and detailed and take that sort of level of attention to them. And that's been, I don't think 20 years ago we probably couldn't have done a job like that, but today.
Josh, the Beacon Theater also, which is owned by Madison Square Garden. We did the Beacon, and absolutely beautiful. It took a long time because it was a total renovation, and everything from wall coverings to curtains to swags. There's just a huge number of elements to that job, and that really came out nicely. And that was a lot of research we had to do.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Some of our work is not. A lot of the work we do really isn't that sort of main drape work. That's certainly a part of what we do, but so much of what we do is production oriented. I mean, years ago, George started working with the Stiegelbauer for Saturday Night Live. They literally call on Thursday afternoon and Friday and say, "Here's this week's design. Make the curtains," and we do it, and that's fun. It's fun to scramble. It's fun as a team to sort of.
Yeah, they
get those
design.
things
I
out
think
the door.
Eugene Lee, who's a designer,
Yeah.
designs on. They write on Monday and Tuesday. They design Wednesday, call us Thursday morning, and they either pick up Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoon.
Right.
And that just shows when they have very little, and it shows when they're inundated with soft goods. They don't know until Eugene designs it.
Right.
So
So you do work on renovations we just talked about
Right.
to Beacon, right?
Right.
But you do a lot of work for new installation. I imagine a lot of that theme stuff.
Right.
Difference is one from the other?
Yeah, I think like particularly if you're talking about the restorations themselves. I mean, it's fun because you get to play detective a little bit. Sometimes you have these really intricate. An architect who's very good and does all the research and finds everything, and that happens every once in a while. But that's not always the case. A lot of times you're getting someone with an old photo of something that might not even be in color and says. Right. I want to restore what we did to its 1920s glory, or which is it's fun because you got to try and figure it out, and it's a good problem-solving thing to do. And a lot of times the mills that made the fabric, they don't exist. You can't find the fabric. If you're going to do it, the sort of applique work and detailed sewing are just so outrageously expensive. You just can't get it done. So that's fun.
But you get to play trying to figure out how to make it happen in a modern day manner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't imagine color might be an issue also.
It sure is, because a lot of times, they might have the original piece of fabric and, it could have been red, it could have been blue, but, in its current
faded,
state, you don't even
tell.
know what the heck
Yeah.
it looks like.
They don't know.
And now it's just dirt.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll give them dirt if they want dirt.
given all
That's
that,
what we'll
speaking
want.
of color, what percent of the fabric we use is black?
Oh, it's got to be about 80% of the
Yeah.
fabric, I would
Yeah.
say, if not more. And the rest is mostly white and gray. So,
Yeah, the old saying, you can have it any color that you want as long as it's black.
Yeah.
With young people coming up into the industry now, how does Rose Brand, how do you guys deal with them? Is there a mentoring process that you get into every once in a while?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I would look at it a couple different ways. One, we have a lot of kids who will come in with their university classes, and we'll give them, tours of Rose Brand, and we'll have various product experts talk to them about things, and just give them an idea of how Rose Brand works as a business. Sure. And certainly we visit, colleges all the time, doing different presentations, and have a number of folks do that for us. So one way I sometimes look at it is, I didn't come from a theatrical background. I didn't go to school for technical theater, but I think if you go to school for technical theater, you probably shouldn't come work for Rose Brand right away, And we really encourage people not to come work for us when they're 22 years old. There's been some exceptions, and there's been some that have really worked out well. But if you go to school for technical theater, you got to follow your passion, And so I think it's really important for people to go out and do what they do, which is, go on the road, go work in a scene shop, go work in regional theater, because that's what they went to school for. That's sort of where the love is. Now, I think as life sort of follows these different paths, sometimes people say, well, I don't want to work 20 hours a day. I don't want to be living in the back of my van going from venue to venue, and that's when it's really a good idea to come work for Rose Brand, because you still get a little bit of a feel for the theater here, and and frankly, we benefited from it greatly, because now we have people who have been out in the field, and now they know how to talk to our customers because they've been that person. That's really what our company is made up of, is people who have been that person, out on the road. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we've told people when they come to work from us out of a strictly theater job that you got to realize this is a business. We have 300. How many employees? We have 3 and a quarter.
North of 300. Yeah.
Every week we got to make payroll. We got to hopefully make a little profit so we can put money back into the business, etc. And I think most of them grasp it. And we've had also a great intern program over the years. It's not really an official intern program, but this year we had a couple kids from School of the Arts.
Right.
We had two people from
Webster.
Webster.
Yeah.
we had a number of kids who've come in here, and some of them have come back to work here.
Right.
And it's been great. Plus, I think Josh mentioned that we've had a lot of groups come in. Tomorrow, I said we have Columbia University, taught by Gene O'Donovan, bringing his kids in here. Gene also teaches at SUNY Purchase. We have a guy here, Tom Sullivan, who teaches on Tuesdays. He's not here on Tuesdays because he teaches 2 classes under Dan Hanessian up at Purchase. And so we've had some great experiences. And we just had a group of kids in from Columbia Business School 2 weeks ago. I don't know, 6 or 7 of them. They're studying family business, and they all come from, we were a little embarrassed because we asked this one kid who's out of Panama.
Right. How many people
We thought it was a little business.
Yeah.
His family does chickens, and they have thousands of employees.
Right.
They own part of the port.
We're hoping he'll buy us one day. Yeah. That's,
Do you want to go in the theater business?
right.
Gentlemen, this has been a treat. I want to thank you very much for coming and playing with us today. And
Thanks a lot, Bill. This was great. A lot of fun.
A lot of fun, Bill. I was apprehensive, but you've done a great job, and you've got a great crew, so
thanks.
we appreciate that.
And thank you for giving us the space.
I haven't sent you the bill yet.
No, you haven't. Okay. Thanks, George.
Thanks,
Okay.
Bill.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay, thanks.